Hey everybody, what's up? Ehren here, Question Period Canada. Season's greetings, all that stuff. Like, hope you're gonna have a great holiday. We're gonna jump into this question period from today, which is super interesting. It's the last one before all of the holidays. Like, there is a long break. I don't think we'll see them again until February, but we're going to jump straight into it. It is interesting. It's Friday, so like a lot of people are playing hooky, a lot of green seats for their tax dollars, but some really interesting moments as well. So we're going to jump straight into it.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member
No
for
Greg
Thornhill.
Fergus, no Chris Donchma either.
While Canadians go cold and hungry this Christmas, this Prime Minister is counting down the hours to another taxpayer-funded beach vacation. He and his MPs are taking a 6-week holiday for voting time and time again to quadruple the carbon tax and defeat Bill C-234 as they pressured senators to gut the bill that this House already passed. If they won't axe the tax today, why won't they come to work on Monday and finally take the tax off of farmers so that Canadians can eat this Christmas?
Yes.
Kind of an answer are we
The
going to get?
honourable
Who's up
Government House
first?
Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh,
And
good.
I'd like to begin by actually wishing all members in this House a happy holidays. I think everybody will be enjoying time with their families over the holidays, and we look forward to seeing everyone back here in February. But I think it's important to make sure that the facts are right, because it was actually Conservative senators that were bullying independent senators. In fact, the Conservative leader in the Senate was actually sanctioned by the other place for his terrible behavior. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
It's not true about the
We all know
senators.
that
There are
the biggest
liberal
bully in
senators.
this House is the Prime Minister, and he is squashing any hope that Canadians had for getting relief this holiday season. They are doubling down once again on their plan to quadruple tax on gas, on groceries, on home heating, and on everything else. There is hardly enough money for food, let alone Christmas presents. 2 million people are eating in a food bank, families are left to skip meals, and children write Santa asking for warm boots rather than toys. Why do these Liberals insist on making Santa deliver the basic necessities instead of toys this Christmas?
The honourable parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I too would like to wish everybody in this House a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. And I also hope that the Conservatives come back willing to work in the new year. But, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives continue to take farmers for granted. Not only do they vote against Canadian farmers, they've also abandoned Ukrainian farmers, Madam Speaker. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, Madam Speaker, and time again, they've been given the opportunity to vote for the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, and disappointingly, they voted against it every single time.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, we're ready to fight for Canadians every single day in this House, despite them not
Living the
wanting to.
dream.
It turns
I
out
hear
that
that.
Santa's not the only one flying around the world this Christmas.
This is
He's
so
got
true.
some serious
Listen.
competition from the Environment Minister. Except for the minister doesn't fly a sleigh. He flies on a private jet. From Beijing to Dubai, he burns fuel and taxpayer dollars just to rub elbows with dictators and pop stars. He emits more carbon in one flight than most Canadians do in a whole year, while telling Canadians to pay more carbon taxes. The more he flies around, the higher the tax goes. So will he park the hypocrisy and finally axe the tax?
The honourable Government House Leader.
Speaking of hypocrisy, Madam Speaker, we know what the Conservatives wanted to give Canadians for Christmas, and that's cuts to the vital programs and services that they care for. In fact, just last week, they voted against $10 a day childcare. They voted against dental care for seniors and for children. They voted against Operation Unifier, which is an important NATO mission to Ukraine. And in fact, when they refer to Ukraine as a far foreign land, they forget that the country that is invading them is Russia, which is a border of Canada as well, and we want to protect our sovereignty here at home. That's what they would give to Canadians.
The honourable member for moment.
We all know Canadians are better off when New
cut
Democrats
the,
are fighting for them
Bloc
in
Québécois
Ottawa.
stuff out.
And here's what we
I just
see
did.
them fighting for in this session: anti-scab legislation to empower workers to fight for better wages and working conditions. For Indigenous, buy Indigenous housing to build suitable, affordable homes for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. National child care and dental care, putting thousands of dollars back in the pockets of Canadians. While the Conservatives vote to gut and cut these services, New Democrats are delivering
What is going
results,
on with
and we'll
the
keep fighting in the
NDP
new
party?
year.
What is
Why
this?
does this government always wait for the NDP to force them to deliver?
Then do something more about it, because they
Government
could,
House Leader.
right? Like,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, we are very proud of the
Alien
record that
baby.
we have delivering $10 a day childcare for families across this country, delivering dental care for low and moderate income children and seniors throughout this country, when we are delivering a sustainable future for Canadians across this country. Madam Speaker, this government is here every day fighting for Canadians, and we are happy to work with any party in this House that wants to support Canadian families, Canadian workers, and the future of this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member.
Madam Speaker, yesterday, Empire Foods, one of Canada's largest grocers, stated that its suppliers were still passing along price increases above the rate of inflation. As costs go up for Canadian farmers and food processors, they have a choice to make: increase prices or go out of business. After 8 years, Canadians have a bad taste of what's in store. When you tax the farmer more and tax the trucker more, Canadians pay more. When will this Prime Minister pull his head out of the sand and acknowledge this carbon tax is the root of food inflation in Canada?
Yeah, bravo. The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Quite the statement from the member opposite,
Quite the
who in the
statement.
past has voted to not go ahead with tax cuts for the middle class, who's voted against the Canada Child Benefit. Just a few days ago, they voted against more homes being built, Madam Speaker. They voted against, in fact, shelter spaces for women and children who are trying to escape domestic violence. It is true, of course, that Canadians are going through a difficult time. We need to continue to be there for them with supports. The Canada Child Benefit I mentioned, the Canada Dental Benefit, daycare support services, all of that is there, and we'll continue that support, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
We voted 134 times last week to show this government they had a lack of
Greg
confidence
McLean
in
is
Canadian
pretty
people.
slick, like,
But Canadian,
bit geeky, but,
Canadians are
like,
responding to food inflation in two ways,
very
Madam
well
Speaker.
spoken.
Buying less nutritious food and lining up for food banks. Reliance on food banks is at
seen him in some
all-time
interviews.
high.
He seems
Worst
all right.
to come, this NDP Liberal coalition is committed to quadrupling the carbon tax on Canadian farmers.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Again, there's a lot of individuals who seem to want to contribute, and then it's not time to contribute. So I'm going to get the honourable member to repeat his question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We voted 134 times last week to throw this government out in confidence measures.
Yes.
Canadians are responding to food inflation in two ways: buying less nutritious food or lining up at food banks. Reliance on food banks is at record highs. Worst to come, this NDP Liberal coalition is committed to quadrupling the cost on carbon tax on Canadian farmers. That means that those who can afford it the least will be punished the most. It's obvious this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. There are two options here. Will the government exempt Canadian farmers from the carbon tax, or should Canada import more non-taxed foreign food?
Well done. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd just like to point out that stunt, that
If you
overnight
do not
filibuster
like,
that the member pointed out,
Van
cost
Coverden.
taxpayers $2 million. So as
Look
he
at his
reaches a fiscal
WEF pin.
responsibility, it's
Look
a little
at
bit tough to stomach. Madam Speaker, the food report that he references actually said explicitly, and let me
clowns.
quote, "It is misleading to suggest that carbon
Misleading?
pricing policies are affecting food prices. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, Trevor Thome said last week, if we got rid of the carbon tax and rebate, then this would harm a much larger fraction of lower and middle income households than it would higher income households." Madam Speaker, the Conservatives are making it very clear who they're standing for. It's big oil and execs and the wealthiest Canadians.
And what kind of a
The honourable
weirdo
member
would
for
wear
Parkville,
glasses like
Saskatchewan.
that?
Twas the night before Christmas when the
This is
members
great.
across doubled down on their plan to keep raising the cost. They set out to do it by taxing the carbon on the hardworking people who do all the farming. This dastardly plan to make our farmers poor was almost disrupted by C-234, but the time is coming for a bigger course correction when Conservatives bring home the carbon tax election. After 8 years, we've gone from feasting to scrap, so for Christmas, will they finally axe the tax?
there's been a whole bunch of these illiterate poems.
Mr. Speaker,
And
I want to congratulate him on
that's the best one, I think.
the great performance, but I'm going to remind him that grain farmers are, every time they come to Ottawa, they ask for new markets, and the Conservatives had a choice last week. They had a choice to support grain farmers and support the Agricultural Bureau in Manila to support the Indo-Pacific strategy. They voted against it. They had a choice, and they voted against this. On this side of the House, we don't not only walk the walk, but we support our farmers.
That's right.
Again, I just want to remind members that if they don't have the floor, they shouldn't be yelling out or heckling or anything. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Madam Speaker, farmers do not like their carbon tax plan. They do not like their pipeline ban. They do not like it here or there. They do not think it's just or fair. It taxes the food the farmer grows. It taxes the tractor when he mows. It taxes the food as it gets trucked. It taxes the people as they get squeezed. Liberal policies are breaking our backs. So when will they finally axe the tax?
The honourable minister.
Madam Speaker, I think what Dr. Zeus is actually concerned about is food security. And food security is actually relevant to that member and the people that he represents in Alberta, because they know, those good Ukrainian Canadians in Alberta know, that Ukraine represents the breadbasket of the world. But you know who's not, it's not just Ukrainian Canadians that are disappointed in that member and his caucus. It's Polish Canadians, it's Baltic Canadians, it's every Eastern European person who stands against the authoritarianism of Vladimir Putin. That member has been noted for his combating communist authoritarianism. Where was he last week when we voted on that?
Order. L'honorable député de Drummond, member for Saskatoon West.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years, the NDP Liberal government has driven up the cost of food for everyone. Canadians know that when you slap a carbon tax on a farmer and then a trucker, these added costs are going to be paid by consumers. Anthony, a dairy farmer in Saskatoon, is currently paying $55,000 every year in carbon tax. It is clear for dairy farmers that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Does the Prime Minister want Anthony to raise prices on consumers, or does he want him to cut production so Canadians are forced to buy dairy from polluting foreign countries?
Parlementaire pour le ministre de l'Agriculture et de l'Agroalimentaire.
Madam Speaker, it is Christmas season, and I actually want to thank all the farmers who are providing food for Canadians. But the honourable member is not telling his constituent and his dairy farmers that last week he had a choice. He had a choice to support dairy farmers and all supply managed sector, and he voted against dairy farmers. He voted against the poultry sector. He voted against the turkey sector. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives love to talk, but when it actually comes to supporting dairy farmers and the supply managed sector, they're nowhere to be found.
That's right.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Madam Speaker, Canadians do not have confidence in this government, and I'm proud to say that our party voted non-confidence in this government 135 times. Madam Speaker, it gets worse. Instead of supporting Bill C-234 to reduce the cost of food by removing the carbon tax on farmers, this NDP Liberal government is going to quadruple the carbon tax. This will balloon Anthony's carbon tax bill from $55,000 to $220,000 every year. This is guaranteed to increase the price of dairy for Canadian consumers. Madam Speaker, what does the Prime Minister want Anthony to do? To raise prices or cut production and force Canadians to import dairy from polluting foreign farms?
Honourable secrétaire parlementaire.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question. I see the enthusiasm they have on a particular bill on the other side. I don't hear them as loud for supporting C-282, a bill that we unanimously supported on this side of the House that supports supply managed. Where is that member's support for C-282 that's on the other side of the House, which supply managed sector dairy farmers, the turkey farmers, the egg farmers, and the chicken farmers are all asking us to support? Where is that member in that party's caucus support for C-282? That's right.
The honourable member for Portage-Lister.
Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister's carbon tax is taking direct aim at Canadian farmers and hitting our grocery prices. This Liberal government doesn't know Jack, who's a grain farmer from southern Manitoba, who's paying $6,000 in carbon taxes on his most recent bill. And when this Liberal government quadruples their punishing carbon tax, he'll be paying $24,000 in a single month. How will the Prime Minister advise that Jack pays that $24,000? Will he be raising prices on Canadians, or should Jack cut back on production, or should Canadians be forced to import more polluted foreign food from foreign farms?
Honourable Minister.
The member
from Portage Lisgar should be embarrassed and he should be ashamed of himself. Last weekend, during the temper tantrum, he voted against Prairie's Can, an initiative, an organization that has invested millions of dollars in Portage Lisgar. He voted against them. He voted against the Human Rights Museum, Canada's only major national museum in Western Canada. He voted against Ukrainian Immigrant Settlement Services in Manitoba. He should be ashamed.
The honourable member for Portage Lisgar.
Madam Speaker, I am so proud, and my constituents are extremely
He
happy
does
that I
great
voted
here.
non-confidence
Leslie
non-confidence
is
against this
going to be
government
great.
135 times last week. And it's become clear after 8 years that this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. Certainly not to Jim in my riding, who's paying $5,000 a month to heat his poultry barn, and this NDP Liberal coalition is planning on quadrupling that, costing him $20,000 a month. So how do they expect Jim to pay that $20,000 a month? Is he going to cut back on production, raise prices for Canadians, or are we going to be forced to import food from more polluting foreign farms?
Yeah. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As members of Parliament, we are representatives of the constituents in our ridings, and they send us to Ottawa with one very important job, and that's to vote on government policies and programs. Yeah. And last week, the Conservatives voted on over 120 items that Canadians depend on. And that member and all the members of the Conservative Party voted against farmers. They voted against supporting supply-managed sectors.
Just messing with Canadians' minds.
Dairy, egg, and turkey. And they need to stand accountable for the fact that they stand against farmers and they stand against our agricultural sector. Thank you.
Right, like that's what bothers me is that they're just
I'm not sure if people are forgetting where they are.
like not dodging questions.
North Island, Powell River.
They're
Mr.
lying
Speaker,
to
Madam
Canadians.
Speaker, everyone deserves to know that they'll make it home
NDP
safely
mixes
at the end
me
of
up.
the
I have
day.
no idea.
Weather
What is she going to
stations in
talk
North
about?
Island, Powell River are vital to this, but poor upkeep and underfunding by both the Liberals and Conservative governments have left our weather stations in ruins. We need real action now to fix this problem. Will the government make sure these weather stations are working or continue to neglect the maintenance of infrastructure people rely on for safety?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I really appreciate the advocacy from the member opposite, who I know recognizes that in modern times, the incidences of extreme weather events happen more frequently because of climate change, and we have an obligation to ensure that the data and the reporting from those weather stations is up to date and fully functional. And that has a direct impact on the safety of our neighbors, particularly during the winter months and particularly when folks are traveling. So I sincerely appreciate the question from the member, and I'd be happy to touch base after question period with the member to discuss how we can make sure that Canadians stay safe over the holidays.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
In 2019, I put forward a motion for a national suicide prevention strategy, and it received all-party support. But since that time, the Liberals have broken their promise to deliver the Canada Mental Health Transfer to the provinces. But I am really concerned that this past week, the Conservative Party voted against the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, as well as voting against clean water on reserves. That would have a huge impact in my region. So we now know the Conservative leader would break any promise on mental health. But I want to know, will the Liberals finally commit to implementing the full national suicide prevention strategy so that people are not playing political games on such important issues as mental health and suicide prevention?
I like Angus. I don't know if I agree with him there, though.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Oh, I include some French because she tried English. She's a true francophone. She slips into French. I kept it in.
That strategy. We continued this strategy by implementing on November 30th the 988 line, the suicide prevention hotline, which has been very successful so far. The line received calls in its first hours. People are well-trained and ready to help Canadians in their difficult moments.
Madam Speaker, our government is unwavering in our support for Ukraine, but there are troubling signs internationally and in this House. This week, President Zelensky urged American politicians not to succumb to far-right, MAGA-inspired plans to abandon Ukraine. Unfortunately, we are fighting the same fight here in Canada, with Conservatives voting against the Free Trade Agreement, voting against Operation Unifier, and against military aid for Ukraine. This week, Vladimir Putin said that Western support
This guy
for
is a
Ukraine is
nut.
waning and that he will win the war. The situation
Crazy
is dire for
person.
all of us. Can the Parliamentary Secretary share with Canadians what we're doing to support the Ukrainian people in their fight for their own survival, for global security, and for Canada's security?
He's such a lunatic, guys. Like, he's the most disruptive liberal, like, outwardly, overtly, that I think
not
there
to give
is.
Vladimir Putin an early Christmas gift and abandon Ukraine. Well, it looks like Christmas came early for the mega-inspired Conservatives right here in Canada. While they're busy voting against trade, against Ukraine, we will not waver. At the International Trade Committee, we heard directly from industry groups, the UCC, and the Ambassador of Ukraine, who supports this modernized trade agreement. I hope our colleagues across the way will take some time over the holidays to reflect, come to their senses, and support this trade agreement with Ukraine.
Honourable member for Langley Aldergrove.
Rocky Ridge Turkey Farm in Langley just received their heating bill, $3,000, and shockingly, a quarter of it is carbon tax. And when it quadruples, Farmer Steve's heating bill is going to be 60% carbon tax. It's ridiculous. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, it is clear that the Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So what's his advice to Farmer Steve? Is it to raise prices on Canadians, or is it to cut production so that Canadians are forced to import food from foreign polluting farms?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
And I actually want to thank the turkey farmers who are doing an amazing job of providing turkeys for all of us during Christmas. But the one thing that the entire supply managed sector is asking of us is to support C282. And I know that that caucus is split, but our caucus is unified in terms of supporting our dairy farmers, our turkey farmers, our egg farmers, our chicken farmers. Where's that member support and where's that caucus support for Bill C282 in the other chamber?
The honourable member for Langley Aldergrove.
Well, where's the support from the Liberals for common
Richard,
sense
you're
Bill
right.
C234, which they rejected? A common sense solution to
Van Pot is
tackling
pretty good.
food inflation.
It's really dry.
Why did this Prime Minister reject supporting Canadian farmers and the citizens who rely on them for a good, safe, affordable food supply?
The honourable minister.
What I want for Christmas is for that member of the Justice Committee and his colleagues to end their antics and stop playing with people's lives. I'm talking about David and Joyce
Ronnie gets on my
Milgaard's
nerves.
law. That's a law that will change the way we address wrongful convictions
So
and end
condescending.
systemic discrimination. Reversing a wrongful conviction should never be a partisan matter. But filibusters by that member and his colleagues at the committee has made it exactly that. These delays mean that potentially wrongfully convicted people, like Indigenous people and Black people languishing in our prisons, will just languish a little longer. That's reprehensible behavior, Madam Speaker, and that needs to be corrected immediately.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Madam Speaker, places of worship in Edmonton have always helped with food hampers for those in need, regardless of their faith. Now, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, they are seeing record increases of those seeking help. So what's the government's solution? More carbon taxes. One church alone in my riding is facing a bill of $30,000 in carbon taxes this year alone. Government's probably not aware, but they can't pass those costs on to their congregants. So when will this government axe the tax so places of faith can have more to give to families in need?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, I
What
think
kind
it's
of a
essential
jacket
that
is
we
that?
be straight with people who are
Making a
going through
statement.
difficult times. That those
I'm a
difficult
fool.
times are felt all over the world. And the fact that Canada is doing better than just about any other country in the world is cold comfort to people who are suffering. But what they need is solutions. Solutions like dental care, so that seniors can get the dental care that they need, that 1 million children can get the dental care they need. But of course, the Conservatives voted against it. And so what they do by trying, it's really about not taking action on climate and cutting support for vulnerable people. That's really what this is about, Madam Speaker.
What it's about? L'honorable
I guess.
député de
Man, oh
Essex,
man.
for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals'
Cooper.
billion-dollar green slush fund is mired in corruption.
Been told he's
Tens of
WEF
millions
as
of
well. I don't know if
taxpayers'
that's
dollars
true,
have been
but
funneled to companies that board members have an interest in. And yesterday at the
What is
Industry
his pin?
Committee, the former chair dismissed this corruption as the normal course of business. In other words, it's business as usual. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, can the minister explain
You're
why
funny,
corruption
Canadian.
and self-dealing are business as usual?
Well done.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's be clear. As soon as we found out about these alleged allegations, the Department of ISED acted quickly. Minister of Innovation has already accepted the resignation of CEO and Chair. We take these allegations extremely seriously, which is why we're following proper due diligence. Our government is committed to ensure that organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance. We are committed to get to the bottom of these allegations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, according to the whistleblower, more than $150 million has been misappropriated by Liberal insiders at the Green Slush Fund. And yet, incredibly, the minister continues to stand behind the board, a board that has engaged in self-dealing to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. This is scandalous. It begs the question, what does the minister know? When did he know about it? And who is he protecting?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, of course, the member opposite knows
jacket.
this,
Come on, man.
agency was created 20 years ago. It operates at arm's length, and I'm not sure what the member is saying. Is he saying that if they were in government,
I'm not sure.
that he would actually be interfering and managing the organization? Or is he saying that if he saw malfeasance, that he would do what we did, which is to call in immediately those to review what's occurred? Because what this is really about is them being against taking action on climate change and being beholden to a base that has MAGA values.
So, again, order. The Honourable Member knows full well that if he has other questions, he can ask for a late show to expand on his question today.
Carol Hughes takes no
for,
prisoners. She's very direct.
Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
It's all right.
Speaker, after 8 long years of this NDP Liberal government,
Frank
we
Caputo's
know
going
that
to put
they're
him
just not
sleeping with the
cost.
fishes.
We have this government's billion-dollar green slush fund. And what do we have following that? Over $150 million that appears to have been criminally misappropriated. Rather than word salad explanations of, we're investigating, we can say this. There's an Auditor General investigation. There's an ethics commissioner, or there's an ethics investigation times 2. Why won't they just call in the RCMP?
The Honourable
I don't know much about that situation.
Minister.
Calling in the RCMP to me, though, doesn't necessarily seem
I got it.
like a solution to very much.
Merry Christmas, Madam Speaker. I hope you have a wonderful holidays. Listen, as we go away, we know that Canadians have had a hard year. We know that we've suffered with global inflation. We've had troubles with war in Ukraine and elsewhere. We've had, of course, the after effects of the pandemic and climate change. But despite that, I think Canadians can feel good about the fact that we still have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and that we have lifted millions of Canadians out of poverty. We have done that by investing in programs like healthcare, like dental care, like the CCB, like $10 a day childcare, like retirement security, and like investments in communities like the Jewish Centre for Greater Vancouver, all investments that the
Honourable Member for Egmont.
Madam Speaker, Atlantic Canada has had its fair share of challenges over the past 3 years. A deadly hurricane, natural disasters, and a global pandemic have left Atlantic Canadians wondering what the future holds. Can the Minister of Rural Development, Anna Coa, outline for the people in my Egmont riding what our government is doing to help Atlantic Canada recover, rebuild, and thrive?
Well done.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Egmont, who's a strong voice for PEI.
She's pretty entertaining. Not a big fan, but she is entertaining.
Times are tough times. And man, last week the Conservatives reminded us why, because they voted against funding to help us rebuild from Hurricane Fiona. They voted against funding for small businesses to grow and create good jobs. They voted against support for our manufacturers and our farmers, and they voted against funding to support Marine Atlantic, which is a vital service a ferry service between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. 'Tis a season of colourful lights, Madam Speaker, but last week they showed us their true colours. Just when Harper was in charge, they continue to treat Atlantic Canada as...
The Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage.
After 8 years, Beijing-backed raiding of Canadian resources is at an all-time high. First, they got this Prime Minister to fast-track the sale of neolithium. Now they're working on a deal to buy critical minerals in the Northwest Territories through acquiring vital minerals.
Yesterday, the Industry Committee passed a motion calling on the minister to invoke the Investment Canada Act to protect this critical Canadian resource. Will the minister listen to this committee and review this deal today?
Yeah. Bravo. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, our government has been clear we will always welcome foreign investments and trade that encourages economic growth, innovation, and employment opportunities in Canada. We know that economic security is national security. This bill, which will amend the ICA, brings forward improvements so our government can act more quickly when required. We'll continue to ensure Canada's prosperity while acting decisively to protect our national and economic security. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Heritage.
They can act today. They need to act today. You can really see where this Prime Minister's heart lies with that non-answer. Not with Canadian resources, not with Canadians, but with his love for Beijing's basic dictatorship. The same love that put 3 other Canadian lithium companies at risk of CCP takeover, and now our only rare earth mining company. Will the minister do the right thing, put Canadians first, and invoke the Investment Canada Act today?
Yeah. Parliamentary Secretary.
He's supposed to be a big up-and-coming star for the Conservatives. He doesn't speak in the House very often.
Canadians to ensure their likely net benefit to the Canadian economy. All investments, no matter their value, are subject to a national security review under the Investment Canada Act.
Thanks for watching.
Therefore, the acquisitions of a Canadian company by a foreign company would be subject to a review under the ICA. Due to the confidentiality provisions of the Act, we cannot comment further on this very concern that the member had. Thank you.
The Honourable for Renfrew Nipissing Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians know higher food
often.
prices are this NDP Liberal coalition's official
Great voice.
policy. Bob and Pat down in Douglas just paid $170 in carbon taxes on their propane bill to dry their corn. Now, Bob and Pat cannot pass this carbon tax on to customers. They have to take the market rate. Bob and Pat absorb all the taxes. Will the Prime Minister tell Bob and Pat by how much they have to cut food production in order to stay alive?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I haven't heard that, and that's a great look she
On
gave.
behalf of military families across Canada whose loved one deployed as part of Op Unifier to help strengthen Ukraine, I am ashamed that the member opposite, coming from Pembroke, actually voted against, with every Conservative across the way, against funding for Op Unifier and military families. Our children, our family members deployed overseas to support Ukraine, and not one of them supported it. Thank you.
The Honourable Member Calgary Skyview.
Madam Speaker, the world has experienced its warmest year ever, with Canadians facing devastating and deadly wildfires. At COP28, Canada advocated to secure ambitious outcomes to keep the Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees within
Not a fan
reach.
of this clown.
With the support of a strong and diverse Canadian delegation, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change was proud to represent Canada at this important conference. Can the Parliamentary Secretary inform this House on the work Canada has done? Excellent question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable and hardworking colleague for his question, but also for his commitment to climate action, Madam Speaker. COP28 was a remarkable meeting, Madam Speaker, where the world came together to commit to lowering our reliance on fossil fuels drastically, in fact, phasing them out, and a commitment to triple renewable energy. And at the same time, Madam Speaker, our government committed to an oil and gas emissions cap, Madam Speaker, and lowering our oil and gas emissions by 75%. We also committed to bringing forth legislation for nature protection in 2024. Madam Speaker, Canadians can continue to rely on Liberals to be champions for the environment and climate change here in Canada and abroad.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
The Liberals are putting our coast and Indigenous communities at risk. After spending $31 billion on the TMX pipeline, the Liberals are pushing almost 900,000 barrels of oil through unceded territorial waters of Pacheedaht
This is
First
an issue.
Nation. And now the Liberals stopped
sure.
any discussions with the Pacheedaht First Nation about creating a marine safety center nearby. Why does the minister have no issue handing billions to oil and gas, but can't spend on basic protections for Indigenous communities?
It is a good question, and also I'll take this just so people know, I'm very open-minded when it comes to Indigenous rights. Like, we have the resources and money. If we don't pay, like, all the scams and scandals the Liberals have been doing.
When it comes to protecting our lands and including the voices of Indigenous peoples, we take that very seriously, and it is at the center of the work that we do. I thank the member opposite for raising her concerns, but we will always be standing for a viable and strong natural resources sector that includes all voices as we move forward.
Good job. Good job.
That's what Jenna says it's going to look like in 6 months.
To the end of question
Wait and
period.
see.
I do
Oh.
want to first,
Wow.
before we go to point of orders, I do want to just,
I guess that wraps it up. So that wraps it up for the holiday season. I don't think they're back until February. So what are we going to do? I don't know. There's going to be so many hours in my day. Like, we started this channel 3 months ago, I think maybe September 29th, something like that. In just a random thing to try. And I was going to treat it like WEF, like wrestling, like good guys but I started watching and following and doing these, and I learned a lot. And Canadians are being duped. I didn't know that when I started. It changes what I'm trying to do here. Like, the channel's grown, that's great. I make a lot of other things. I've tried so many different types of things, and I'm going to continue to try to grow on that. But through the voice of a voter to other voters, I'm not some right-wing hard nut. I know the times are bad and we need change. This government is not relenting, like giving anything up. They cut a little bit of the carbon tax for some of the people. That doesn't make sense. Again, I don't know all the information. I am learning, and the things that I learned, because I feel that I'm doing it honestly, can be shared with Canadians. Like, I'm just a voter, but this is what I see. And when I'm watching this, I feel like they're lying and just being very deceptive. And not like in the way that it used to be. I know politicians have always lied. That's sort of the game. But the stakes are so high now, and so much money, and it's all happening so quickly. How are we going to recover if it doesn't change soon? Going to wrap up. I'm Ehren. I love hanging out with you guys. I'm sorry that at the end of these, I don't really get a chance to see the messages and that it wraps up really quickly like that. I do appreciate everybody that's in this. Become a part of this group, I feel like, of, I think, mostly open-minded people that are just realize that change is necessary, like, or at least it needs to be examined, and that maybe not enough Canadians are seeing this type of thing. Because I think if most people that I bump into at the grocery store saw this, they'd be able to tell, like, who's being more or less honest. But I don't think people are paying attention. I know I wasn't. I thought it was just like tough times and that's the way it goes. But that's not just the way it goes. Things happen like this for a reason, I believe. And this set of cabinet ministers seem to have an ulterior agenda or motive than what's best for Canadians. That's just the way it seems to me. Like, and I think it probably seems that way to you as well. So let's get the word out. Share this with one friend, one person that you know that might want to know more about it. Like, I think I've got an easy way about me. We try to keep it fun and light, but informative. And also, there's the old expression, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're not correct. Like, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist type of person. There are some, though. There are some definitely, like, what the hell? What happened with JFK? Like, what happened? There's a whole bunch of things out there. That's a different video. I'm Ehren. Question Period Canada. Love hanging out with you guys. Merry Christmas. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of weeks. I know that it will be Canadian politics, trying to make things that people want to see. But also, I've been so hard at this, like 12 hours a day for 3 months, like every day of the week. I could use a little break, actually, just to change what it is I'm doing, because I've been making little marginal changes and small improvements, but until you take a step back, you really don't know. And glad we grew this group, though. I think we'll be hanging out more. There will be more live videos and other videos, so stay tuned. Get notified. That's the easiest way to know. If I'm doing something live, if you're notified, it'll let you know before I do it. I'll try to always give at least 20 minutes. I should be better at planning than that. I'm not at this point. So notifications are the way to go. Ehren, Question Period Canada. Guys, it's been a blast. 3 months. Wow. This many people. It's pretty crazy. And the comments and everything, if you look at the little community that we've built, people are always participating and it's positive. People just want change. They're frustrated with the way it is. I get that. But it's still a nice, clean form. There's very little hate or like really, really upset people that have lost control. And I can understand why people would be that way, but that's also not, this isn't the space for that. We'll catch you next video. We will have more live things this weekend, maybe this evening. But now I'm going to take a step back and figure out what we're going to do for the next couple weeks. We'll be making the shorts. We'll be keeping up with those. Catch you next video, guys. Try to have something healthy to eat and stay warm.